Engaging citizens, a game changer for development? The role of citizen engagement in service delivery, with Rakesh Rajani, Director of Democratic Participation and Governance, Ford Foundation.
Welcome to the third module. I'm delighted to be here with you to talk about citizen engagement and how we can help improve public service delivery. Governments are meant to be elected by and serve the people. Every government will claim that. But when you go down to the community level and talk to people, in many countries that's not the picture you get. Most people don't feel that governments are there for them or listen to or care about them, or that the government will solve their problems. They feel they have to fend on their own. That's okay, except for many things people can't manage on their own. They can't afford to pay for their own water supply or their tutor or security, and they need governments to deliver services. This is where the triangle of accountability comes in. On one hand, people can influence policies by voting in the right leaders, and that's important. And this is the long or once in every so many years road to accountability. But on a day-to-day basis, for the practical everyday matters, it's the relationship between the citizen and the service provider, the nurse, the doctor, the teacher, that matters the most. So how can citizens engage with the teacher or the nurse or the local leader? How can they have a voice in meetings of the school committee or the land committee or get a road built so they can get their food to market? This is the short or the everyday road to accountability. Now we have a problem. In many places, the everyday road exists in form, on paper, but few citizens actually travel that road. For example, in the time that I spent in communities, I've talked to many parents who tell me that the school doesn't work, that there aren't enough teachers, or the few teachers who show up, in fact, don't teach in the classroom. But the problem is that these parents do not believe that they can do anything about it, that they can hold the head teacher or the school committee, which has been set up to give them a voice on school matters, to provide them everyday accountability. Those institutions don't work for people. They don't solve practical everyday problems for people. So then, if that's the case, if that's a reality for most people, how do you get people to travel the road of everyday accountability? And I think there are two key preconditions I want to share with you. One is information and the other is feedback. So let's start with information. People need signposts to know what's going on. How can citizens engage with the health center if they have no clue what services are meant to be provided, by whom, and at what cost? Who can they call or go to if there's a problem? Now these things seem pretty obvious, pretty straightforward, except in practice it is very hard to get information most of the time. Many governments and civil servants have inherited an operating culture which is closed and secretive, where information is not meant to be shared. So what happens as a result? People just tune out, both the service providers and citizens, and do not feel ownership of what's going on. The good news is this old culture is changing, slowly and with many hiccups and many setbacks, but definitely changing. For example, a whole bunch of countries have now agreed to have freedom of information laws to ensure that the information they hold is given out to citizens. You have hundreds of thousands of data sets which before were kept in closed doors in shells or through password access that are now being opened up so that anybody, but particularly the intermediaries, can go through them and analyze them and make them more visual so people have a better idea of what's going on. Governments are beginning to realize that it helps them to be open, because when they do that, they engender trust and get good ideas from people, and it builds their credibility and helps solve problems. Now, while this is happening, we've also learned some lessons along the line. A lot of information has been put out, which hasn't been that useful. And we've learned that in order for information to be useful to citizens, there are at least 5 things that are important. The first is that the information needs to be relevant. It needs to matter to people. It needs to be about something they care about. A second point that's really important is that for most people, they want to know what's going on in their community, in their school, in their clinic. If you give them information at the district level or the national level, yeah, it's interesting, but it doesn't help you. So it needs to be disaggregated at the most local level. Third, accessibility. We have to speak in a language that people understand. It has to be in a format and in a location and way it's posted where people can easily access that information when and if they want it. The fourth point, and this sounds obvious but it needs to be said, is the information needs to be reliable and accurate. A lot of the time, because of the perverse incentives in government puts out information that's not truthful and nobody believes. Well, if you do that, citizens aren't going to take it seriously. So it needs to be reliable and it needs to be accurate that people can trust. And finally, a real problem we have is that these things are often not sustained or consistent over time. Information is not timely. It's given out in ways that might be there at the beginning, but then for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years it's not updated. So giving information that's timely, that people can trust will be updated all the time is really important. And it's not so delayed so that people can make good decisions. All these things sound obvious, but you'd be surprised how little this happens. Now, governments giving out information is a really important first step, but it's not enough. The everyday road to accountability needs to be a two-way street. That is why, after information, the second most important thing is feedback. Policymakers and service providers need to ask for feedback from citizens and give them feedback and respond. To ask citizens, for example, we've set this thing up for you, a great school or a good road or a good service. Well, how is it going? What is your experience? How can it be improved? Do you have ideas for change, something that we haven't thought about? When you do this, you get 2 benefits, at least 2 benefits. The first is you identify problems so that you can work on them right away instead of waiting for the end of period or end of project evaluation. So you can find the problems and fix them. But the other great thing about asking for feedback is you can identify what's really going well. You can figure out who the heroes are, who the dedicated or the creative types are, who are making things work despite difficulties. And what you can then do is tell their stories and emulate those stories. Now, as important as it is to give feedback to governments and governments to ask for feedback, there is a really, really important role for independent feedback that is not controlled by government. The economist and Nobel Prize winner Amartya Sen famously showed that in countries where there's a free media, you don't have famines because that information gets out and governments are compelled to act on it. So you need a free press and free and independent civil society organizations to give that feedback. But there's one big dark secret about feedback that I want to share with you. If you ask for feedback and don't take it seriously, then you breed cynicism. People will become cynical and they won't give you feedback. Earlier, Tanzania did a national development plan where we asked for ideas from people. Over 100,000 people took time to send in ideas, and those just sat in a box. So those sorts of things make people feel, you know what, this is not serious. So what's really important is when we ask for information, we should make sure that we take it seriously. And as a basic start, there should be transparency on how the feedback will be taken seriously before you ask for it. And then once you received it, there should be an accountability function where you should actually have to explain to people what you did with the information that they gave you. So we've seen that for everyday accountability to work, 2 things are absolutely important and necessary: information and feedback. And that these things need to be done in the right way for them to be experienced as genuine, meaningful, and practical. But let me end with 3 common myths or pitfalls of citizen engagement that many well-meaning people who want to do citizen engagement fall into. What are these pitfalls? The first is this idea that citizens have a lot to say, just give them the opportunity and they'll solve all kinds of things. Well, guess what? We shouldn't romanticize citizens. Citizens are busy, they have lots of things to worry about, they don't have time on their hands, and frankly, citizens are just not interested or not able to solve a lot of problems. So this idea that citizen engagement is a magic bullet to solve a lot of our problems is false, and we should not build on it. The second pitfall or myth is that technology is a game changer that will allow us to do so many things and solve all kinds of new problems. Well, guess what? Technology does allow us to do a lot of things. The mobile phone in particular is a wonderful tool that allows citizens to give feedback. While technology is great, much of the time, the old problems that have stopped people from doing things, fear, uncertainty, non-responsive government, a worry about politics, institutions that are corrupt, all those very old problems still remain. And technology cannot trump those problems. Technology can help us navigate those problems, but technology is often just 10% of the answer. 90% of it is politics and institutions and us figuring out those very human issues that stop things from happening and how we can deal with that. And that leads me to my third and final pitfall, which is about this idea that somehow in this brave new world, we can avoid politics and keep away from all that dirty stuff around politics. Well, guess what? I think many of us who worked on citizen engagement and the use of technology for citizen engagement have realized at the core of it, it's about power. Who gets to make decisions? Who gets to have a say? Whose voice counts? Who gets to set the agenda? Who can be ignored? Who can't? These very old issues that we've had with us for time millennium are at the heart of citizen engagement. And in that sense, a real mistake we can do is to somehow think that we can do citizen engagement devoid of talking about politics and talking about power. So in conclusion, what do we know about citizen engagement and what have we learned about citizen engagement? We know that it can be incredibly powerful and hold incredible promise. And where it has worked well, we can see how it can help deeply transform the very nature of government, the very nature of the relationship between governments and their citizens. But we've also learned that it's very hard to do well and that there are many pitfalls. We don't have all the answers. We have hunches, we have some experience, we have some lessons, but we don't have all the answers. So what we will need as we go about doing it is a great deal of humility, of openness, of listening, of trying things out and learning from them, making adjustments, tweaking, adapting. Essentially, what we will need is a culture and a practice of learning, which is not afraid to admit failure, of changing our mind and improving things as we go along. We do this work of citizen engagement not because it is a proven success that will solve all kinds of problems, but we do it because it holds a twin promise. First, it reflects the democratic ideal that people matter, that what people think and care about and say matters. And second, because it can help us get things practically so that lives improve, so that the woman who wants care for her child has a better way of getting it, so for the parents and the children who care about getting a decent education can actually get that from the school. Thank you very much.